Boston is just the mecca of education in the world.
Boston has always been known as a student town, the kind of academic environment I really want to be in. So this is the most international school I've ever seen.
The other day I walked into the elevator, there's Spanish, and then there's Italian, and then there's French being spoken, and then there's also Mandarin, and then there's me. So you walk in and you're thinking to yourself, this is the world and this is the way that it should be.
I love everything about Boston. I mean, I'm a Red Sox fan, so I go to every single game that I'm possible to go.
This kind of sports culture here in Boston is just so rich.
It's a vibrant city, and the history that's here.
The location of the actual campus itself is right by the Charles. So the view is absolutely gorgeous.
There's music and definitely a wonderful nightlife. And you would be very hard-pressed to find something that you wouldn't enjoy in this city.
There are different types of working professionals in Boston that Hult has relationships with. They bring in and we can ask them questions about potential internships and potential jobs, and also just having a tour of their headquarters.
The professors that came, oh my God, they had this depth of subject matter. The content was something I had not been exposed to previously in my education.
You meet with a caring career advisor who puts you directly on track with your resume and with your LinkedIn profile.
I can tell that in these past 2 months with my teammates, I improved my professional skills much better than like 5 years working before in my home country.
What I imagined really is a perfect fit. It's what I wanted to see when I got here.
And I thought, if this is what I'm going to get from 1 year, oh, my life has changed.
And I joined Hult as a professor of finance before I became the Hult Boston campus dean. Talking about our campus, you're in for a treat. Our campus, I would describe it as a very dynamic, thriving academic community. You know, we have our academic buildings, we have our residential buildings. So there's a sense of a campus ambience. We in Boston offer a multitude of programs, more than 10 different programs that range from the undergraduate business degree to specialized masters in marketing and finance, business analytics, MBA program, executive MBA programs. So we have quite a wide variety of programs for different student profiles. Of course, if you do have any specific questions about the programs, Marley and Francisco will be at your disposal after the session to address those questions. But I want to convey, the excitement of a campus that's already in this wonderful academic environment that Boston, and for that matter, New England is, and that is part of the United States. Brooke, I believe you mentioned that you want me to convey why is it that I thought Hult stands out as a business school.
Yes, please.
When we share that mission to strive to be the most relevant business school in the world, to me, that relevancy is created in two different ways. First, yes, we provide that knowledge and we develop the skills needed to successfully make business decisions, right? Of course, that's extremely important. That's a critical component of what we, as all of us, right, we journey, right, to become better professionals. But I think there's also a second component that really differentiates us further. And that's I would argue, the care and the attention to developing the individual, to developing this person that has a growth mindset, a person that in a way looks at the world through the eyes of a lifelong learner that's willing to receive feedback. These people we know are more successful in business decision making. That aspect of an individual that is a good communicator, that works well with people. These are the traits that employers want in the people that they bring in to their firms. Of course, they need to know about marketing. Of course, they need to know about accounting, finance, and so on. But they also, have this other added feature, and I think that care that we provide at Hult to insert that component, the individual growth component, into our program, into every curricula that we have at Hult, I think is what really outstands as an institution. We, in fact, have earned a few years ago a recognition as for our initially for the MBA. That's where it was launched, for this type of approach, which was to incorporate that into all programs, right? Personal journey in addition to development of concepts and skills. So as you can see, this gets me excited, but I truly believe that these two things are foundations that really are strong at Hult and differentiates us from other institutions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And now I would like to turn this over to Professor Joanne Lawrence. Professor Lawrence, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and allow you to go ahead and share your slides. And I just have you on mute, so I'll have you unmute whenever you have a second. Oh, still on mute there.
Got it.
There we go.
Sorry, everyone. Welcome. And I certainly enjoyed watching that video, as many of the people in it were actually students that I have taught. So it's always very fun to see where they are now and what their view is of Hult. So just to give you a little bit of background, my name is Joanne Lawrence. I am one of Hult's global faculty. It's not changed. Okay. So I'm one of Hult's global faculty and have been involved with Hult since about 2008. In terms of background, like many Hult faculty, I am a pracademic. So I have a corporate consulting background before I became involved in academia. And in fact, it was my work in corporate that led to my appointment at INSEAD as one of their, that other international business school, as one of their faculty members. So my background, the last role I had, I lived in London. I worked for a British company that then merged with an American company. The merger of equals was extremely unusual and very successful. It led to our writing a book about it that was published by Harvard Business School Press, and also to a case study at INSEAD that became a best-selling case study. And in that, it was really all about how do you create a new company from two very different companies, which were both culturally different. It was English and American, as well as two corporate cultures, which was, again, SmithKline and with Beecham. One of the reasons why I love teaching at Hult is just watching where all of you are calling in from today. It is truly international. The fact that you're interested in Hult right now says we already share something in common. I started my life as really wanting to be a truly international person. And that has guided all my choices in terms of my corporate jobs, my consulting roles. And in fact, one of the reasons why I settled on Hult when I moved back to the US was I was looking to sort of expand and to build on my truly international experience and be able to share it. As a result of that, Hult, which at this point is truly one of the most international business schools in the United States, in fact, in the world. And I am a global faculty member, meaning I teach at all our campuses. I am Boston-based, but teach in London, Dubai. I've taught in Shanghai. I also teach in San Francisco. So again, this completely global perspective. The picture you see here is a background to the UN. So another reason why I love teaching at Hult is when I first interviewed with them, one of the things they were interviewing me for is the class I teach today, which is Business and Global Society. And in that course is actually a core course, and the idea of ethics is implemented in all of our faculty, in all of our courses. So that said to me already that Hult was different. Hult really felt this was a critical part of leadership in terms of making it a requirement. When I was asked to teach an international body of students, one of the things I was worried about is that it would be from a totally Western perspective, that as we look at the world and this intersection of business and society, you know, I am an American, I did live in the UK, I have a very Western perspective. But I was very conscious that our students can come from 100 different countries. How does what I teach them resonate in their corporate cultures? And so for me, the UN offered the most global organization. And in fact, some of their principles, which we'll talk a little bit more about, were set up in 2000 to sort of create a framework for businesses to sort of operate in this much more global intersection. So today I teach business and global society. I also teach an elective called social innovation, which is really about how do we use business in ways that will help to transform society. And that is a little bit of what I would like to share with you this morning.
Professor Lawrence, do you mind if I interrupt quickly? I think either the slide is frozen or it wasn't able to start just yet. So if there's any way, maybe we can have you, I'll stop sharing your screen and we can try to reshare if you'd like.
Sure. So you're not seeing my next slide then?
Correct. It was just stuck on that first one.
Okay.
So, but take your time.
All right.
And while you're doing that, actually, oh, here we go. We can see the
that work? Did you want to say something else?
Oh, no, go right ahead.
All right. So what I wanted to do with you today is to just give you a snippet of what my course is about at Hult, but we're going to talk a little bit in this global perspective, right? So let's look at what some of the global challenges are that the world is facing, in particular business. Let's revisit and think about what is the purpose and role of business in this ever-changing environment, and what might be some of the business models and skills that are critical to enabling you to really maneuver in this constantly changing environment. So for those of you that are not familiar, the World Economic Forum started back in 1971. It was developed or started by a man named Klaus Schwab, who really felt that the global challenges we were facing at that time, so you can imagine how they've just grown enormously since then, but he thought that we needed to bring together multi-groups of people, so business, government, and NGOs, just different organizations coming together to really promote this idea of public-private cooperation. This group is the largest gathering of multi-stakeholders in the world, even today, and it meets every year in Davos, Switzerland in January, all right? So I want you to take a minute. I want you to pretend that you were invited to go to Davos this year. Now, I want you to think pre-COVID, okay? I want you to think about what might be the top 1, 2, 3 major issues that you think, as a representative of the world, we should be looking at globally in the next decade. Just take a moment and put it in the chat box. And let's then see what you all have to say. Anybody writing any ideas? I'm not seeing any, Brooke, so I'm wondering if...
I can read some out loud if you'd like. They may be sending it to just some of the panelists here. So we have non-renewable resources, climate change, influence of China, poverty, environmental issues, global exchange barriers, rules for AI usage, energy efficiency, and then economic recovery post-pandemic.
Okay, all right. No, and those are, no, they're all great examples. So if I wanted just to share with you what some of the ones have been that have come up, say over the last decade or so, they fall into these 5 baskets. So back in 2017, the Economic Forum sort of looked at what are the big global risks and where do they fit. So as some of you said, poverty, and we talk about that in terms of income inequality. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that because you might not realize how important it is to us that there are so many poor people and this gap between the rich and the poor. Societal, the idea that we have these divisive politics. You are sitting here just a few days before the United States presidential election. And of course, the world is watching it. This polarization is not just here. We're seeing it in many countries around the world. This us versus them mentality. And why is this dangerous? Well, it's dangerous because some of the issues we're talking about, as we skip down, and you'll see, require cooperation. If everybody's splitting apart, when it's at the exact same time the world needs to come together, it doesn't bode well for mankind. Technology, huge issues, right? So you have things like Facebook, Twitter, Google. People say they're platforms, but are they, right? They're media companies, they're advertising companies. Who should be regulating them? You have artificial intelligence. What will that be doing to job creation going forward, right? You have the sharing economy, you know, using apps. So lots of technology creating a lot of disruption. And while it has benefited us a lot, there's also a lot of risks and consequences that perhaps we haven't addressed. As I mentioned, geopolitical, this idea of needing to cooperate across sectors, across countries, across regions. At the very same time, things are falling apart. And environmental, as so many of you mentioned, lots of issues around what is climate change doing, and we're seeing it increasingly, and we're hearing more voices being raised about what the damage might be. So one of the things, I mean, capitalism has come under a lot of challenges because of this idea that has it indeed contributed to this huge income inequality. And you know, you could say, well, right, we all live well, it's sad, it's just too bad. What does that mean for us? But at the end of the day, business, we cannot prosper if you have this big gap between rich and poor. It creates instability. If you think about it, you know, people revolt when they have nothing to lose, okay? You have people living in gated communities because they're afraid for their security. You have increasingly humanitarian crises where you know, people will work for anything, or we have human trafficking where parents are selling their children, okay? These are all things at the end that impact all of us. So this is about economic dysfunction. So as a result, and why all these things are coming under attack is because in a way, capitalism has left a lot of people behind. Not saying it's bad, it's also created enormous prosperity, but it's the top billion. And there's, you know, we have a world that is moving towards 9 billion people, okay? So what role does business play in perhaps helping to bring about this greater equality? So let's think about the world in 2030 to 2050. What are some of the challenges that we're facing? Well, the world is moving towards 9 billion people by 2050, most in the developing world, and more than half potentially living in urban centers as the poor seek greater opportunity. We have changing demographics. The developed world is getting older, okay? And as they say, old people don't buy things, right? That means also great chronic diseases, a lot more diseases to deal with, and that increases healthcare costs. We have growing numbers of young people in the developing world, many without hope, many who have grown up in never known a country that wasn't involved in violence, okay? The environment increasingly stressed because as the world gets, has more people, water scarcity, poor sanitation. I mean, there's a statistic that says we have more cell phones than toilets, right? And yet sanitation creates a lot of disease that, again, as a result, and as COVID has shown, these diseases spread often indiscriminately. Climate change is creating droughts, flooding, fires, which is creating environmental refugees, all right? A lot of the poor are fishermen, they are farmers, and droughts, rising seas, those are the jobs that are going away first. And those are the people that end up not being able to cope with a stressed environment. Technology, not just for what it's doing to our jobs or the fact that news spreads so quickly, it also is generating the public's demand for greater accountability. When you see things like the factory collapse in Bangladesh, where thousands of lives were lost, and you see companies like H&M and Gap were having their clothes made in those facilities, people are asking, where were the companies? Why couldn't they do more? So again, with this increasing internet connection, we are getting more demands from the public for greater transparency. And as we mentioned, this growing income disparity, which is meaning that the benefits of capitalism have been very unevenly spread. We really are seeing this in this COVID. I mean, look at the companies like an Amazon, and then look at the jobs that have gone first, right? A lot of those are the people that are poor, they're unskilled. You have this migration of people wanting to seek better opportunities in richer countries, but now seeing that the doors are being shut to them. So these are global issues. They're not just one country. They're growing everywhere. But I want to say we are business people, and I want to also say that all these problems could be sources of opportunities and of possibilities, all right? So a few years ago, McKinsey looked at these emerging markets where, a lot of the poor, a lot of the growth is coming in terms of numbers of people, but saying that also if there was more opportunity for people in those markets, the potential is huge for business, right? So that they actually could represent a huge amount of GDP going forward versus where they are today. If we look at the developing world's annual rate of growth, look at India, look at China, that growth is much larger than, say, the developed world where, if GDP in the United States grows from 2 to 3%, we consider that good, okay? If we look at what the World Bank is saying, that again, the developing world could account for more than 50% of global consumption by 2050. The base of the pyramid, which some of you may have heard the phrase, this was coined by C.K. Prahalad, a professor of marketing at the University of Michigan. And he was estimating that, again, business has been addressing the top 1 billion people. The bottom 1 billion may always be poor. They're, may be considered the indigent poor, but there's this whole group in the middle that have the potential to move up in the pyramid. And those are the people CK has suggested business would do well to focus on by both as potential consumers, as potential skilled workers. And yet for the most part, if you look at revenues of businesses, it's something like only 17% of their revenues were coming from these developing markets, versus some companies like a Unilever today where 57% are coming from those markets. What's the difference? Why isn't business tapping more into those markets? And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals, which many are seeing as problems, but problems turned into opportunities. So just to give you some background, the UN for the most part has always been about governments working together. 194 countries are members. They are trying, it is the world's largest convening body, trying to address issues which affect everyone. And foremost among these is poverty, okay? Same with the World Bank. In 2000, Kofi Annan, who was then the Secretary General of the UN, said, you know what? We've been dealing with some of these problems since the 1950s, and they don't seem to go away. And is it that we are trying to deal with them in a vacuum and not engaging companies, business, because at the end of the day, business has a lot of the resources that, but through partnering with them, perhaps we could resolve. So in 2000, Kofi Annan created what became known as the UN Global Compact, which again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but the UN Global Compact invited business to join the UN, to sign on, to make a commitment to abiding by a certain number of principles in terms of how business acts, and also identified 8 goals that were kicked off in the millennium, year 2000 to 2015, that would be targets that business working with government in various countries could help to resolve. Well, they made some very good progress. They did bring some people out of poverty by partnering. And in 2015, when those were set to expire, they sat down with the countries and the businesses to try to identify how they could take this forward. So what emerged from that conversation are what are called the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And the idea is that these are areas where if business and countries focused, they could help to achieve that #1 goal, which is no poverty. All right. So they're very ambitious. There are targets beneath each of them if you go into the website. But if you look, they also can represent enormous opportunities for business, whether it's dealing with the climate, looking at improving or creating affordable energy, whether working on clean water and sanitation, creating more responsible supply chains. These are ways that by working together, you can truly transform and create this more inclusive economy, bring more people into the economy, and help to reduce that gap between rich and poor, and create a more stable global society, right? Oops. Sorry, Brooke, I'm not sure.
No problem. Take your time. While you're looking for that, we actually had a question come through for, I'll let you
Go ahead. I'm not sure why it's closing out though, but let's just see.
We'll let you figure that out. And while you're doing that, we had a question come through from Marley regarding the November 19th scholarship deadline. So Marley, if you are available by any chance, would love to answer this. Are prospective students who apply before November 19th eligible for financial aid and scholarships?
Yes, so happy to answer that question. So yes, all students globally that meet the November 19th scholarship deadline are qualified for all of the scholarship and financial aid that we have. This is something that you have to apply for. It's not automatic. So when you do apply, you'll have an enrollment advisor that reaches out to go over next steps in that process.
Awesome, thank you.
Hey, I think we're back.
We still can't see the full screen.
Really? Mine is showing it full.
If you want, we can try to stop sharing again and then reshare. That seemed to work last time.
Okay, go ahead. I'm really not sure.
No worries. All right, so you can go ahead and share whenever you're ready. Perfect, looks great.
Okay. All right, sorry everyone, not quite sure that. All right, so okay. So in terms of looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and inviting business to work with governments and NGOs and other parts of the sector, one of the things that I think is important to remember about whether business can achieve these or not is that business has always been about visionaries dealing with societal problems. And in fact, the minute you forget that, you're kind of out of business, right? So it takes people with vision and courage to see their ideas through. These are just some examples of businesses that have truly helped to change the world. And it might sound odd that you have the light bulb up there equal to the computer and the internet, but the light bulb, by making things more visible, all, in the evenings. It helped with enabling students to study longer, businesses to stay open longer. So again, they could helps education, helps increase income. The one that's very exemplary is the automobile. Until Henry Ford, the automobile was actually only for the elite. The average person could not afford a car. So it was considered a sign of great wealth. When Henry Ford came up with the idea of how do we democratize the automobile? How do we make it available for more people? Well, you'd have to bring down the cost, right? So in pursuing that goal of making the automobile available to more people, he created the assembly line, the concept that by enabling people to focus on one part of the process at a time, you could do it cheaper and faster. So the automobile, he didn't go just there, right? He also decided that for his employees making the automobile, to be able to afford the automobile, that he would have to increase their salaries. So right from the beginning, we have the example of a businessman looking holistically at how do we improve society by making them more mobile, able to not have to live in cities, move out to suburbs. He created through this process the middle class, because now not only could people afford automobiles, they were going to be able to bring down the cost of a lot of other things that until then had been only the rich were able to afford it. So this was vision, refrigeration, right? Being able to not have to go to the store every day to buy food. You didn't have to have food that's spoiled, right? You didn't have to spend time every day going shopping for essentials, right? Which, again, detracted from your ability to earn an income. So these are all ways business solutions actually helped to improve society, okay? So I think today's visionary leaders, and increasingly, I think since from the first time I started teaching this course to today, we've actually seen a lot of these visionary leaders starting to see what the aspirations are of different sectors of the economy, they're converging, and that the needs that they each have actually complement one another. So let's think about it. A lot of the developing markets are looking at, they need more education, they need better healthcare, they need access to food and water and energy, right? By the same token, they have a young workforce and potential consumers that business is looking for, right? You have governments that are seeking tax revenues and NGOs that are looking to improve jobs and infrastructure. The governments have the regulatory power that could be helpful for business, and NGOs have things like local knowledge and the trust of the local communities that, again, business could tap into. And we're looking at businesses, as I said, those top billion people are getting older. They're not going to buy things except maybe healthcare. But you have a large, huge market where they need new markets. They are seeking to create new products and services for those markets. They need talent, human resources. At the same time, they have the skills, they have the financial resources, they have the know-how and the ability to bring groups together. So each sector has a need, and each sector offers a resource that the other one needs. So in fact, this idea of working together has enormous power for helping to transform the world as we go forward. So as we look at all this, and given how much business has been, and capitalism has come under attack in recent years, I wanted to ask you all a question, because again, you are our business leaders of the future. I want you to ask you, what is the purpose of business? And what do you think it should be? All right, I'm going to share with you some of the things that have been said over the years in terms of what people have felt. So back in the 1950s, Peter Drucker, who's considered a guru of management, said the purpose of business is to create and keep a customer, okay? The economist Milton Friedman in the 1960s said the only responsibility of business is to engage in those activities that enables it to increase profits as long as it does it ethically, okay? And then finally, in the last one, more recently, it has been about the business of business isn't just about creating profits for one stakeholder group. It's really about creating value for multiple stakeholders. All right, so 3 different perspectives, okay? I want you to take a minute, and I think, Brooke, you're gonna put up the poll. Take a minute and just think about it. Is the focus on the customer, as Peter Drucker has stated? Is it about creating profits, as Friedman has stated, with the idea that, you know, if you get profits, you pay taxes, and that helps society? Or is it about stakeholder value, looking at far bigger than just one stakeholder group? So just take a minute and click your response.
At this point, we've had about 50% of the audience vote, so I'll give it about another 30 seconds or so, and we'll end the poll. All right, I'm going to give everyone about another 5 seconds or so, and we're going to close this out.
Okay, well, this is very exciting. I will tell you, when I first asked my students this question, probably about 10 years ago, the answer was profits. That was it, right? That the whole idea was to just make profits. Increasingly, though, I think we're all, and that's why I am so encouraged by your generation, because I think increasingly you are seeing business as playing a much larger role than just making profits. So again, just to say that I think when Friedman had his quote back in the 1960s, his whole point was that if business makes money, they will increase jobs, they will pay taxes that help society. But at the end of the day, that's not exactly what has happened. And in fact, in this pursuit of profits, one of the issues has been is that it's often always about reducing cost. Well, if you think about it, if you reduce cost at all cost, you are actually undermining what Peter Drucker said, which is really to create and keep a customer. I mean, the way you create and keep a customer is by offering high quality products. You want to create loyalty with your customers, so that means you do a great job. You have a highly motivated workforce. So in fact, Peter Drucker's comment and Mark Benioff are much closer, because to create and keep a customer, you do need to think about all your stakeholders. All right, so what we're seeing today, which is really a movement, is this idea of moving away from a unrelenting focus on shareholder value and expanding our viewpoint, all right? In fact, there have been an author, a law professor, who wrote The Shareholder Value Myth, which really what she was saying is that the responsibility of a company is not to one shareholder group, it's to the company. So if you look at the company, that might mean that you develop your employees so that you improve productivity, but you also improve their engagement in the company. You look at how your supply chain is, and that people are treated fairly and ethically. So that was one view. Even Jack Welch, who was considered the greatest CEO of the 20th century, has today called it the dumbest idea in the world. And Jack Ma of Alibaba, right? Customers number 1, employees number 2, shareholders number 3. So again, and Benioff goes further, this pervasive theory is wrong. The business is really about improving the state of the world, and that in the end increases value for everyone. So this whole idea of moving from shared value from shareholder value to shared value. And it's really about creating new value. And Michael Porter, who's actually considered the father of strategy, which you will study a lot about, his 5 forces model, he too has come with this idea that the idea of pursuing shared value actually leads to greater innovation. And in fact, back in 2019, the Business Roundtable, 181 CEOs of American companies said that they are committed now to leading their companies for the benefits of all stakeholders, which includes customers, employees, suppliers, communities, and shareholders. So it's not one at the expense of the other, but how do we actually try to create value for all stakeholders? And again, in 2020, this idea of we need to rethink capitalism was the highlight of the 2020 Davos meeting. And this was, again, the idea that, you know, companies can't, this whole idea of trying to avoid taxes at all costs. Well, I have to say, when I hear that, I understand we all want to minimize taxes, but at the end of the day, businesses use the roads that government build. They actually use the patent protection that governments provide. So really, we all play a role. And the idea of really looking at global supply chains and what the impact is of business on local communities, looking at human rights, these are all issues that are not just the purview of governments, they are the purview of business. But in order to achieve this new model, one of the things, and I love this quote by Buckminster Fuller, because what he's saying is you really never change things by fighting the existing reality, right? And we're seeing this play out in politics today, which is I find very interesting. You can't go backwards and you can't fight what's actually happening. The best way to change something is to build a new model that actually makes the existing model obsolete. And I think that's when we're looking today, when we look at innovation and disruptive innovation, that's really what we're talking about, okay? So it's this idea of, you know, again, talking about transformative businesses that actually can grow revenues and profits at the same time they bring in people and reduce poverty by helping to educate those people to actually fulfill the jobs that they need. And by the way, when they fulfill those jobs, they now have income to buy things, right? So this bigger picture of sustainability as a source of opportunity. And actually for a corporation, the idea can actually help you create competitive advantage. So in looking at, when we look at the purpose of business, it's also relooking and rethinking the role of capitalism, okay? It's capitalism that instead of defining it as how much money it creates or how much does it add in terms of a, you know, GDP, it's really looking at how well are people living, right? So how well has business solved a human problem? And I really have to, you know, let's think about what business has done for us. You know, really from, I was with a pharmaceutical company that started in the whole antibiotic business. If you look at things like, you know, and fast forward today to technology and all the information that is at our fingertips, right? And that's happened in my lifetime. So business has done an enormous amount of good by giving us access to a lot of things we wouldn't have had before. I don't think that's about money. I think that's about how has business helped to improve our lives. And I'm just going to talk briefly about some of these new models, right, that we've seen. We see things like Unilever creating the Sustainable Living Plan, where they look holistically at what they're doing. And one example is Project Shakti. Project Shakti, what Unilever does is they're training women in India to be their distribution channel in very rural markets. And to do that, they're training these women, last count 45,000, to become entrepreneurs. So what does that do for Unilever? Well, it creates a trusted resource in rural markets. These are women that live amongst the villagers. In terms of selling their product, they are helping these women to better their lives by giving them an income. And by the way, when women make money, sorry guys, but when women make money, they tend to send their children to school and use that money to improve healthcare. So now you're having the effect of the next generation being improved by these women having jobs. And oh, by the way, once that woman does have income, she's going to probably use it to buy things like soap from Unilever. So it's a virtuous circle that's being created. You have companies like Philips and Patagonia that are looking at today the circular economy, the idea that there is no waste, that all materials are repurposed and rebuilt into the system right from the beginning. When you design a product, you think about where is it going to end up. Or companies like Nestle that are training smallholder farmers on how to generate more produce and crops from their land. And in the end, Nestle ends up with a secure supply chain, better quality crops that go into their tea and their coffee. So again, sustainable driven strategies that benefit the company, but by the way, they're improving the lives of the people that again will create this spiral effect. Another models that we're seeing are increasingly partnerships. So if I look at IKEA and UNICEF, they're trying to eliminate child labor. If we look at the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation, they are working with government, say in Africa, to create partnerships with companies that enable them to rebuild their infrastructure. Or in countries like Chile, where the consumer product companies, which you can argue create the most waste, are partnering with governments to create recycling systems that help them get rid of that waste. And finally, and again, I was early on in this space of social entrepreneurship back in the early 2000s, and I've been amazed at how it's exploded. And in no small part due to the Hult Prize and what it's done by raising the profile, but it's happening everywhere. Waste Concern in Bangladesh was started by two young engineers when they graduated and saw in their country that waste was such an enormous issue, and not just what it looks like, but all the diseases that it breeds. And they created a model that today is being copied in 27 countries, right? So using waste as because most of it's organic, how do we create organic fertilizer, selling that fertilizer to local farmers, which creates healthier produce, which again improves the lives of people. So this whole idea of a wealth creating ecosystem. We also have new financial models, socially responsible investment funds, green bonds, impact investing. 1 out of every $4 today is being invested in socially responsible investment funds. Enormous, again, since I began teaching this course, the growth has been enormous. And in fact, in 2018, the CEO of the world's largest investment fund, $6 trillion under management, came out saying we are no longer just going to invest in companies that have a financial record. We are going to be looking at how are they doing on the social and environmental front. And indeed, just this morning, I saw an announcement about BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, a number of these investment firms that are now talking about how do we use investment as a way of driving some of these changes. Because if you're a CEO, you don't want to be left out of this movement because you are going to be left behind in terms of your shareholder, in terms of investments in your company. So again, this idea that it's not about what business does, it's how business is doing it. And that's really been the criticism of globalization. It's not about globalization because in fact, we've all benefited. We have access to more products at cheaper prices than ever before, but it's how it's being implemented that is the moral and humanitarian problem. So that's where the Universal Code of Conduct that the UN Global Compact launched in 2000, which consists of 10 principles, which are focused on human rights, on labor rights, the environment, and the last one, which was not added until 2005, because they couldn't get countries to agree, was on bribery and corruption. And this code of conduct, they also have this adapted for business schools, of which Hult is a signatory, which is really how do we teach students about how you implement some of these principles into the way you lead. So for us and for you and for what we teach, this was a book I wrote about how do you implement these principles into how we teach. But to be transformative, we need to really understand the needs of our markets a lot more. You can't just adapt. You know, if you have a refrigerator that you're selling in the developed world, you can't sell the same refrigerator in the emerging market. You have to be able to deal with these constraints, which might be around, you know, lack of access to electricity. It might be about lack of skilled workers. So what do you do? How do you deal with that? And critical, how do we build trust, right? Which is really in short supply today. I think we are growing increasingly distrustful of each other. And to be honest, business relies on trust. I mean, if you think about it, when you go work for a company, you trust they're going to pay you a fair salary. When you go to invest in a company, you trust that they're giving you the right financial information. And when you're a consumer and you buy a product, you are trusting that that company is selling you a product that will deliver what it says it will. So just very briefly, I think that there are increasingly two skills I'd like to highlight that I think you as students and future leaders need to think about. One is systems thinking, the idea that you can't just focus on one thing at a time, that everything is connected. That we need to stop thinking about, this is the problem, this is what we do, and this is the results. Never actually looking at the fact that what that decision is changes the reality, that the real world looks more like this. Just a quick example, I've talked to the students when we talk about the environment. Keurig with their coffee pods, brilliant idea, right? We'll save coffee, we'll give every consumer access to a wonderful fresh cup of coffee. But what about the pods? Did they not think about what happens to all the plastic pods that are used to create that coffee? So that idea of trying to create something, that would be good for the consumer has actually been bad for the consumer, in fact, bad for all of society. And now a new company that acquired Keurig, which is environmentally conscious, is trying to deal with this issue. So we need to remember that every decision we make changes the reality. That systems are multi-connected. So as I said, you need to think about all these dimensions when you think about a system or making a decision, whether it's an economic one, like how do we reduce the cost in the labor supply chain? You've got to remember that, are you still behaving ethically? Are you hiring a supplier that uses children? Have you asked all the right questions? And, people will say, oh, it's the supplier's problem. Society today is saying it's your problem, right? A company should know its supply chain, and they should not be using slave labor or children, which in both cases are still sadly prevalent today. So again, the World Economic Forum is saying we need to think about systems from the environment and natural resources to supply chains and labor. So our whole focus should be on how is everything interconnected. We need to think about management systems, which is really what my argument is. We need to align companies around a purpose, and if it is, to create products that will, help cure people, then what's our strategy? Investing in R&D. What's our culture? How do we make sure that employees are thinking that way? And importantly, how do we measure what we're doing? And just to give you an example of a Brazilian company, Natura. Natura is a cosmetics company that has been exemplary in terms of integrating all these factors into how they run their business. In fact, when they published their annual report today, it's one of the few companies in the world that reports on integrated standards, not just economic performance, but environmental and social. And they encourage their employees to think this way about everything that they're doing. They created a Natura Connected, where they actually invite their consumers to participate in what they think Natura should be doing in sustainability, right? And they recognize, and this is something more companies need to keep in mind, you are in business only as long as you serve society. That's called the license to operate. The minute you betray that trust, you are out of business. And history is littered with companies that fail to live up to its role in society. We're looking at Purdue right now with the opioid crisis, or Thurana, all these companies that thought they'd get away with just selling a product, not realizing that the minute you stop serving the society, they will go out of business, all right? And this is really the CEO of Natura, this is his comment about you have to be able to trust a brand. So again, this is the way their management system works, starting with the inputs that go into their cosmetic products out to how do they deal with the consumer and engage them. So finally, just to say my feeling on what global leadership constitutes today is your ability to think big, to really look holistically at how is everything interconnected, understand externalities and unintended consequences of what it is that you're doing. My example of Keurig, great coffee, but very bad for the environment. Look at your ability to engage multiple stakeholders and keep an open mind and respect for these multiple stakeholders in terms of, you know, we all want to make the world better. And so in making the world better, you can make profits. There's nothing bad about making profits. It is really saying, let's make it by keeping in mind all the stakeholders, not just one at the expense of the others. And that gets to my final point about ethical leadership and trustworthiness. So the ability to, a good leader instills trust in all the people that follow them. They act with integrity. And in the case of how I teach responsible leadership, you act according to this code of conduct that is the UN Global Compact, rather than always thinking that you can act, you know, if it's acceptable in a country, it's okay to do it. Well, if it's not acceptable in your country, it's not okay to do it. We don't have two standards. There is a universal standard of behavior. And really encouraging you as a leader to be committed to these principles, as well as courageous in implementing them. So I want to end there. I think we'll be taking questions later, but what I really wanted to say is my goal as a professor is to create transformative leaders who aren't afraid to make ripples, and to really ask you to think about what kind of ripples will you make when you're in a leadership position. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Lawrence. That was great. All right. Again, we will have the questions for any of this content at the end of the session. But for right now, we are going to hand it over to Nav Duda, who will be able to tell us a little bit about Hult's Career Services. So Nav, if you'd like, I will let you share your screen.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Nav. I'm from the career development team. I'm based out here in Boston, but I look after the team that is represented on both the Boston and San Francisco campus. Depicted on this slide, you see many of the faces that are part of our career development team from San Francisco all the way out to Dubai. So everything in between, London and Boston as well. And so what do they do? You know, no doubt you guys have had access to career advisors in your past, perhaps in your undergraduate degree, or if you've got previous, master's degrees. And you know that, this set of individuals typically help you with, developing career plans, helping you with your career goals, and of course, helping you with LinkedIn and resumes, right? We kind of kick that up a notch at Hult, right? Because we're dealing with a highly international student population. So the faces that you see on this screen really, really specialize in how do you make international careers happen? How do you make transitions from one country to another? How do you transition from one industry or one function to another? Or maybe a combination of two or three of those variables. So what I want you to take away from this is the folks on this screen have years of experience dealing with thousands of students per year on making these transitions. So over that time, they've developed a lot of wisdom around what works and what doesn't work when you're going to make these international transitions. In addition to that, one of the things that we've really developed in terms of acumen this year is digital presence, right? Well, increasingly with COVID, we've had to, look for jobs remotely, interview for jobs remotely, leverage our LinkedIn and online branding materials a lot more in the job search process. And so we do a lot of work, particularly in the last, 8 months, but with the students who are in class right now on digital presence. We operate on this methodology called the roadmap. And so, career development has, a typical path. You usually start with who am I, what are my interests, what are my strengths, self-exploration, reflection, if you will. And, then you move into observe, which is about exploring the market, right? So, if you have an inkling that consulting is for you, but you've never participated or worked in a consulting role, you want to, get insight from people who are in that industry. What's it like to work in consulting? What's the day-to-day look like? What skills do I need to be successful in that field? And so what we do is kind of expose students to that industry. And how we do that is typically through alumni panels. And so, I'll tell you a little bit about one that we held last night with some alums from Amazon. But once you explore the market and you kind of understand the types of roles and occupations that are of interest and important to you, you start to develop a targeted plan, right? So, if you are kind of early career, you probably have many, many options in your mind. You've got maybe 10 or more, maybe 20 things that you want to do. Our career advisors will work with you to kind of create a targeted plan, which is around your industry of choice, your functions of choice, and geographic areas. Where in the world do you want to work? Many of you who are considering coming to the United States or to London, you've got Europe, the entire European Union kind of within your reach, and the US is a massive market. There are jobs everywhere in the US. And so we really work with students on kind of developing a targeted plan. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time, applying for jobs that may or may not be a good fit for you. And then ultimately, securing internships, jobs, and salary negotiation for some students, right? Who, perhaps are in a position to negotiate. And so we work with students on, how do you take that offer and determine if there's any leverage there, right? I've got on this screen just a typical timeline of when things happen throughout the year. This fluctuates depending on intakes, right? So this year we've got a bit of a staggered intake. Not everyone started in September. We had students start in October, November, some in January. And so we also have dual degree programs, right? And so this is just a sample of kind of what we do in each given month. But we start tremendously early, right? Irrespective of when you start, our mantra is always to start your job search early. And that doesn't mean the act of handing out resumes from day one. That means the preliminary career development, activities, like starting with self-reflection, right? So what do I have an interest in? And as you develop, or progress through your journey at Hult and you take these different courses, sometimes new interest areas pop up. Maybe you've never, looked at strategy or consulting or marketing, and you started to take these courses and you start to develop an interest, and that'll happen, right? But what we do is we always encourage students to start early. And so the way that we help facilitate that, if we think about just this past September, 7 weeks ago, we started with our 2020 intakes, and we jumped right into kind of networking and recruitment opportunities. And so we leverage the support of our alumni community. So Bloomberg, for example, for our students who were out in Europe. But this was an online event, so it was attended by any student globally. But the alums in Europe put together a Discover Bloomberg event, right? So, what do they do at Bloomberg? What types of roles are at Bloomberg for business school students, both from the undergraduate, all the way to the postgraduate level? They shared advice and insight on kind of the recruitment process, right? So once you figure out the type of role that you're interested in, this is the type of skill you need to develop over the course of your journey at Hult. This is how you apply. These are the types of questions that get asked in an interview. And the follow-up to this then is to actually help with kind of interview prep for our students. Right? This week, we also launched the first of 3 recruitment events with PwC. So our employer partners at PwC have a strong need, particularly in tax and audit in Europe. And so they're hosting a number of virtual networking events, right? So the point of this is to meet the class of 2020, kind of suss out kind of what their interest is, their personality types, of course, and then kind of move into shortlisting and interviews. Yeah. And then last night we held the first of 4 of our Amazon events. So the first one was Find Your Fit at Amazon. So we had about 80 students attend last night to learn from 2 of our alums here in the United States who made that geographic transition, went from one country to another after they graduated and started to work with Amazon. And so what they shared yesterday is, as a business school student, first of all, what does Amazon look for in the way of both hard and soft skill? What do they look for in kind of personality? So what does a fit look like in that regard? They directed students on how to find roles that are of interest to you at Amazon, right? How to adapt your LinkedIn. So thinking about the digital presence and digital branding, how to adapt your LinkedIn to attract an Amazon recruiter, right? Because this is predominantly how Amazon has been, finding talent. LinkedIn has been a great source. They actually shared Amazon recruiters are going to LinkedIn before they look at resumes, right? And so the point of yesterday was, let's talk about your resume, your LinkedIn first, and then how do you adapt your resume, when it comes time to submit formally. And so this event is kind of part 1. Part 2 is students are to go back and find roles that they're interested in. They're to get their LinkedIn and their resume in order with the help of our careers team, our career advisors. And then in December, which is just a month away, the alums are going to do referral interviews, right? And so they're going to interview the students, look at their LinkedIn and their resume, and if it looks great, they're going to formally go into the applicant tracking system at Amazon and put in a referral, right? And so we know that referrals, particularly when you're looking for jobs, are very lucrative in landing roles, particularly in the hidden job market as well. And so we tend to try to facilitate these events with our alums where possible. So 3 great events that we started super early for our students that just started 7 weeks ago. But this is predominantly what our team does. Finally, on the career advising front, we've in 7 weeks or 6 weeks, actually, we've facilitated 650 face-to-face career advising appointments. Now, I say face-to-face, of course, face mask on and 6 feet apart. But for our students who are on campuses and our career advisors who are on campuses, we've done around 650 appointments so far, and 250 appointments done virtually over Zoom, right? And so what I want you to take away from this is, regardless of whether you are studying in person, on campus, or in a hybrid mode, you have access to one of our, not just one, all of our career advisors who are here to support your journey. And so with that said, on behalf of the careers team across our campuses, we look forward to meeting you soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nav. Really appreciate that. So now we're going to go into the Q&A portion of our session. So again, we have Professor Lawrence, Nav, and our enrollment advisors, Marley and Francisco. We do already have one question that came in for Nav. So what I'll have you all do is just please insert any questions that you have into the chat function, and I will read them out loud to the panelists. So Nav, the question is, I have admission for the dual degree program. What is the eligibility criteria and process that I should follow for this program? That may actually be for Marley or Francisco.
Yeah, I can take that. I can take that one. Yes, so hi everyone. I'm the Associate Director of Enrollment for the MBA with Hult. To answer that question about dual degrees, and actually it adapts to MBAs and both masters. So basically, the dual degree, the second master's degree, which is part of that dual degree program, is attached to your primary application to either a master's program, an executive MBA program, or an MBA program. So essentially, when you're applying for an MBA, master's, or EMBA, you can express interest in applying for a second master's. If your candidacy is retained by Hult in either one of those main programs, and you have expressed interest in a dual degree, then you'll have a pre-acceptance into that second master's. So there's no separate application process for the second master's as part of the dual degree, to be clear. There are academic conditions to complete, basically graduating from the MBA, master's, or EMBA in order to progress into the dual degree. And then there are obviously some scholarships and financial aid opportunities associated to the dual degree. So once again, it's a streamlined process, and it all starts with an MBA, master's, or EMBA application.
Perfect, thank you. I'll give everyone a couple more seconds here to ask any questions that you may have. Again, feel free just to put those in the chat function there. Anything else, Marley or Francisco? I realize I didn't allow you the time to introduce yourself, so if there's anything you'd like to say about the programs, and just mention what campus you're at as well.
Hi, everyone. My name's Marley. I'm based out of the Boston campus. I am the Associate Director of Enrollment for all master's programs. And I am also from Boston. So if you have any questions about the city or our master's programs, you can direct them towards me. We do have our next scholarship deadline, which is November 19th. So as I mentioned before, if scholarship and financial aid is important to you, I would suggest activating your application before that deadline.
Great. And Francisco, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, so I am the Associate Director of Enrollment for MBA and Executive MBA. I'm also based, like my colleague Marley, I'm based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, out of our Boston campus. And my primary role is to help assist candidates with all admission questions and to overall assist them with their journey to Hult, you know, and definitely assisting with any questions on financial support as well that we provide here at Hult. So
Perfect.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. All right, so we have a question from Daishan asking if we could get more cool sample lectures. We do host virtual open houses, I would say probably every 4 months or so. And we also do have actual sample classes similarly to what you just saw with Professor Lawrence. And these are available to anyone that fills out an application after working with our enrollment advisors. And we host those relatively frequently, so there will definitely be more available to you. I am going to give this one to Marley or Francisco. Which of the campuses has the most amount of students, if you know that answer?
I believe the Boston campus has the largest amount of students. The Boston campus hosts our undergraduate programs as well. And then, of course, we have our MBA and a decent amount of our master's programs at the Boston campus. We have the Master of International Business, the Master of International Marketing, the Master of Finance, and the Master of Business Analytics, all in Boston. So it is the largest campus, and in my opinion, the best one.
Thank you. This question is actually for Nav now. What sort of corporate roles and industries do Hult students typically work in?
Yeah, perfect. You know, it tends to change slightly as we move on in years, and what I mean by that is we see more technology, right? So technology, internet companies, cybersecurity companies. So that obviously grows as it's just a growing industry in itself. Consulting is one of them, right? And so consulting is as an industry is one of those. Consumer goods, fast-moving consumer goods is big this year, as you can imagine. Just looking at the employment outcomes of our class of 2020 as we start to get them in, you know, obviously hospitality and tourism taking a little bit of a hit, right? But right now, students who are finding jobs, particularly in this time, it is with tech companies, software companies, internet companies, and supply chain and logistics, particularly for those food delivery services like the DoorDashes, the Postmates, you know, your Uber Eats and the like. Yeah. In terms of roles, we're seeing everything that has analyst at the back of it in massive demand, right? So financial analysts, marketing analysts, social media analysts, supply chain analysts, business analysts. Those are the big roles, right? And so that's why within our curriculum everywhere, data analytics is embedded, right? And then you've got your degree program behind that as well. But outside of that, we see you know, strong need for business development and sales, right? Particularly for businesses who are recovering from pandemic, or they're probably still in recovery mode. But so you know, account executive is a big one. Marketing director, business development / sales manager, marketing manager is a big one. And then particularly in our with our students in MIB, MSBA, but even in the MBA, we're seeing, if it's not analysts, we're seeing consultant roles, right? And so these are not necessarily with kind of big four. You have some students who are going off to the big fours, but this is with boutique consultancies, right? And particularly we've seen ones, students with boutique consultancies who are specialized in serving small to medium-sized businesses. And that is again tied to kind of business recovery because of COVID.
Thank you very much. And you may have touched upon this a little bit earlier, but do you mind explaining what month a student can apply for a job during the dual degree program?
Absolutely. I think there's two things to note, right? While you're studying, you have, if you're whether you're in Dubai, London, or the US, you can do an internship during study, right? And so there's an actual course, elective course called internship that you can take. So in your first year, that falls somewhere between May and graduation. So let's just say May and August, and that's your first opportunity to do an internship. We, as a careers team, strongly advise, particularly if you're trying to make a geographic transition. So let's say you're from Latin America and you're studying in London. If you want to work after graduation in London, we strongly suggest that you start with an internship. It gets your foot in the door. It gets you to gain local experience in a new market that you've never worked in. Yeah. If you go on to do the dual degree, you have another internship period. So while you're studying in the dual degree, if you are eligible, right, you can intern between October and March of your dual degree program. And so we've had students, for example, who have come from, let's say Germany, have done their first degree in the United States in either Boston or San Francisco. They've done an internship in year one, right, May through August. And then in their dual degree program, they've done another internship between October and March. And you can see, that amount of time, particularly if you do it with the same company, you really become kind of entrenched and embedded, where by graduation, it's almost a no-brainer that you're going to get hired by them, right? So when we look at internship conversion rates, we know that around 65% of our students who do an internship end up parlaying that into a full-time role upon graduation. What does that mean in the way of full-time work after graduation? When are you eligible to begin working? After dual degree, it's as soon as you get your EAD card, right, from the government. And so this could be as little as 1 month after graduation. It could be 2 months, but really you're looking to secure your job kind of by end of March, April of your dual degree year.
Thank you very much. I have two back-to-back questions for Marley. Number one being, which campuses are accepting the 2021 spring intake? And number two, one of your candidates, Jordan, recently applied for the MIM program and would like to know, for scholarships, do you need to apply for these upon admission, or is it during the academic process as well? So 2 enrollment questions for you.
Okay, great. So for the spring intake, this is actually our first year having a spring intake, and this will be the Master of International Business as well as the MBA at both our Boston and London campuses. So that will be starting this January. We'll also have a part-time Master of Business Analytics option starting in March as well, both virtually and in person at the Boston and London campus. And then Jordan, to answer your question regarding scholarships. So congratulations on applying to Hult, first of all. This is something that, you can start working on now that you've activated your application. And, that will be reviewed by our committee. Just work with your enrollment advisor. I'm not sure if it's myself. But once both of those documents are in, your scholarships as well as your declaration of finance form, the committee will be able to review, and then it typically only takes a few days for you to get an award. That can be pre-admissions decision or post.
Thank you very much. All right, the next question that I have here would be for Nav. Will a master's in finance graduate with no prior work experience face difficulty in finding a job?
I think, first and foremost, everybody faces difficulty in finding the job they want, right? We can easily find a job in most economies, but finding the job you want takes time, takes effort, takes planning, right? But that's why you have the support of your career advisors at Hult, right? To answer your question though, many of our students, particularly in master's programs or in our undergraduate program, don't have any formal work experience, right? That is not a barrier to finding or entering the labor market, right? They end up doing so. How you facilitate that is, through the work that you do academically, right? So, a lot of your courses have project work tied to them, which are tied to actual businesses. So they're not case studies that are pulled out of the old school Harvard case study packet, right? Some of them are actual live project work that you do that you can create portfolios out of, right? And so we always get our early career students to showcase that work, right? Particularly if you're a finance or you're a Master of Business Analytics graduate or student, sorry. There's other things that you can create. So for example, we talk highly with our students about creating GitHub portfolios, right? To showcase work. So once you start to learn about financial modeling with Excel and things of that nature, show that work off in your portfolio. Once you start to do analytics work and work in Tableau, you show that work off in GitHub, right? Which is what we say, kind of like the LinkedIn of analytics, if you will. That's where you kind of show your skill and your capability, right? But no, it's not a detractor. If you've got no work experience behind you, you can build that through coursework, but also through internships, right? As I talked about in both degrees, your first degree and your dual degree.
All right, great, thank you. I do want to be aware of everyone's time, so I'm probably going to take about 2 more questions here, and all other questions you can email to admissions@hult.edu. I'll put that in the chat function. This first one here, it's a back-to-back question for Francisco, as they're both enrollment questions. So one of the candidates, Faye, would like to know more about scholarships. So if you'd like to mention the scholarship deadline, I know that usually it's best to speak to your personal enrollment advisor. And then the second part of the question is, how has the COVID pandemic affected Hult, and what can we say about the near future?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Brooke. So I'll address the first question, which is scholarships. And I really want to emphasize and stress that there's no, and I'm speaking on behalf of masters as well, there's no separate process to apply for scholarships. So it's all very nimble and streamlined in the same application process. So the next deadline to apply for scholarships as part of an admission into Hult is November 19th. So really, if you're applying to either spring 2021 for certain programs or fall of 2021, really it's highly advised to submit an application at least with a resume to review obviously the fit for the right program by November 19th. So we would need to receive that application by then. In terms of scholarships specifically, we have different tiers and categories of scholarships that are available for both executive MBA, MBA, and master's programs. So for example, if you have, Professor Joanne Lawrence was talking today about sustainability and the SDGs, for example. So if you have any expertise, for example, with nonprofit management, or have worked as part of a multilateral, or have any interest particularly in the aspect of business with social good, maybe applying for a social impact scholarship might be very interesting, might be a great fit, and we can consider that for a certain amount as part of a merit-based scholarship. There's also needs-based financial aid that could potentially be awarded to you based on your financial situation. So just to second what Brooke said, we're going to review this case by case, but obviously overall we want to consider the international students and domestic students, obviously, for the wider pool of funding that we have between now and November 19th. So definitely that's what we encourage. The second question has to do with, it's more of a general question about how have we been able as an institution to address, this pandemic, the challenges. I can speak from an enrollment standpoint, but overall as an institutional standpoint as well. I feel Hult has done a magnificent job in terms of transitioning from purely on-campus, in-person modalities in terms of instruction into more of a hybrid type of model when this whole pandemic started hitting, particularly the United States. So the months of February, March, since we had already a virtual platform available for the full-time MBA for certain type of courses, what we've been able to do is have a smoother transition into this virtual live sessions as part of a full-time MBA program, master's programs, and obviously executive MBA. So yes, definitely there has been some turbulences and fluctuations in terms of enrollment. But what I would say is the overall student satisfaction in terms of having students in the class and interacting virtually live has been extraordinary, and that's definitely something that we take into consideration when it comes to discussing and getting feedback from candidates. So yeah, and we're still seeing an interest in terms of doing a master's or MBA for next year, given the fact that a lot of candidates need to reskill and upskill in order to meet the growing demands of this new market, particularly. So definitely we're seeing that opportunity there. And whether you want to do hybrid or in person, if you have specific questions as what would be the best modality and the best format for you in terms of a program, please address those to your enrollment advisor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, just to be aware of everyone's time, we're going to finish off on this last question, and I'm putting in the email address that you can submit all your questions to, and we'll have your individual enrollment advisor reach out to you. But this one is from Marley. What kind of appeal do I need in order to get a good evaluation for scholarship or financial aid?
So just to address financial aid directly, that is needs-based. So that's going to be a form that you fill out declaring how you do plan on paying for tuition at Hult. In terms of standing out for merit-based scholarship, this is, like Francisco said, 2 essays that you would write based on the experience that you do have. For the master's programs, that can be experience that you had in your undergrad or through your travel. But really, performing well on your interview for the school is a great indicator as well for merit-based scholarship. Your interviewer could potentially tell your enrollment advisor some scholarships that really stood out for you based on your interview performance. So I would say doing well on your interview, and then your merit-based essays that you will select just based on the experience that you do have.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists. All of your sessions were really insightful. It was wonderful to have all of you. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. Again, I do have that email address down at the bottom right-hand side of the screen and put it in the chat box as well. So please email admissions@hult.edu with any further questions, and you can visit hult.edu/events for any future events with our great professors, career services, and enrollment team. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.